Hi, I'm Dave Wurzel, and you're watching Spotlight. Today on Spotlight, we're going to take a look at education, post-pandemic years, I hope, right? And with me today is Principal Dr. Jen Pollock from Shepard High School, Palos Heights here. And what we want to take a look at is education moving forward from what we went through the last couple of years, lessons we learned from it. Schools had to adopt in so many ways to a variety of restrictions, mitigation policies to help manage the situation. And I know I was still teaching at that time when it happened, and I'm still in schools now subbing and talking with parents and staff members. My impression is for students and families, teachers, administrators, support staff, up and down the line, these have been incredibly difficult years. I mean, maybe that's an understatement.
I would agree.
To acknowledge
Yes.
there was a challenge here
Yes.
that, and obviously not something that was anticipated. And what I'm hoping that we can talk about are what are some of the things that we learned that going forward, there are some positives in terms of what education will look like in the future. Hopefully not having to deal with this again, right? But we did
Yes.
learn some things maybe. And why don't we take a look at that first? So you've been in District 218 since 2007,
Yes.
I think, right?
Yes.
Teacher or educator since '99,
Correct.
right? So you've
been
got
a
a
while.
lot of background here. How about specifically what were you doing that year when COVID hit, and then what was your responsibility going forward from there?
Well, when we got the call, I believe it was Friday, March 13th.
Yeah, I remember
Friday
the day,
the
right?
13th.
Yeah.
And I was currently the associate principal at Shepard High School, and this required our attention. And for various reasons, many of the COVID protocols, reviewing them, being knowledgeable on them, we all had to take part of that. But the associate principals in our district became sort of the gatekeepers of the information, the distributors of the information, and we also became contact tracers. We were in communication. We had one administrator at our district office who coordinated many of our meetings, and he worked directly with the Illinois Department of Public Health. And so we had lots of communication chains that needed to go back and forth regarding COVID, just how it was impacting our staff and our students. And we all had to adjust very quickly to what that meant for education. And how do we, you talk about safety being a foundational element of everything and everyone's needs, right? We all have to feel safe. And this was a new threat to our safety that we didn't experience before, at least to anybody that I'm aware of in our lifetimes, in terms of, a pandemic threatening our safety. And that was very real. And so we had to quickly adjust, and it was a sharp learning curve for just about everybody. Yeah. And so many questions, not enough answers, and it really was difficult.
I think you've provided a really good context for, I'm going to use my experiences in education. I was a teacher for 35 years, that you used the word quickly a couple of times, and knowing what like curriculum process is like in a school.
Sure.
There's a process, and things very rarely happen quickly, right? I mean, we're going to review the course, we're going to make recommendations on a book and curriculum changes.
Yes.
And those easily can run over a year,
Yes.
So when you talk about here's a pandemic and you're forced to change your teaching structure, the model, the method, all those things, to make it happen quickly seems almost impossible, really, but you were forced into that role.
Yes, it felt almost impossible.
Right.
We had to make some really quick decisions, and we were also given, I think we were all glued to our TV sets right around 2 o'clock every day. There was a news briefing by, both, federal and state agencies, and giving us updates on what was going on. And then, we would quickly jump back into meetings together as an admin team throughout our district and try to identify, based on what we now know and what we're now required to try to accomplish, how do we go about doing that? And so many brainstorming sessions about how to accomplish this, and how to stay connected to our students, how to stay connected to our families, how to continue to provide them some of the things we provide daily that we don't necessarily associate with education, like meals, lunches, breakfasts, things like that. So, and it became a real challenge, and you know, we had to adapt, and it was more than quickly. It was immediately. We had to immediately adapt what we were doing and continue on with many of the services that we provide, but in a totally foreign format.
So, you know, you gave me a nice segue there, because that was, and I think you touched on, you know, we think of the class, we think about going to school, we think of the classroom, but actually there's this huge ripple effect because of co-curriculars and athletics and support services supplied and meals, and, you know, so it goes way beyond, let alone how are we going to adapt a curriculum to a model that was not really, you know, part of that thing. So let's transition into that. You know, you had to try some things, right? How are we going to deliver our curriculum? How are we going to provide an education for our kids under these constraints? What are some of the things that you tried? Let's take a look at, just in general, what were they, and then we can take a look at, these are things that, you know, going forward we want to continue with.
Well, you know, at the very beginning it was, you know, I remember in some of our programs, in some of our special programs, we were physically making packets of papers, you know, and delivering them to homes. Students who, we were lucky enough that we were a complete one-to-one district already. All of our students had iPads, and we made many announcements on Friday the 13th. Please take your iPads home. So, you know, we began with some of those things, like who needs physical hard copies? And some students at that point, and teachers, didn't have everything digitized. So, so even if a student was equipped to learn digitally, maybe our curriculum wasn't translated that way. And so we had to quickly figure out ways to get actual context and materials and information to students as quickly as possible. And while doing it remotely, many of our students didn't have Wi-Fi, so we had to quickly order, you know, devices that we could deliver to homes, so that there would be Wi-Fi connection in the home, so that students could, you know, log in and access their learning material. And so there was, you know, this just a lot of balls in the air, a lot of people moving in different directions, trying to solidify a platform that you also at the moment didn't know how long we needed this platform for. And then you know, there was a no harm edict that came out, right? So where students were before the pandemic, even though you weren't, you were probably around 75% of the way through your school year, and then in high school level, that's halfway through your second semester, which is totally different than your first semester. You know, how do you wrap that up? And then, so, you know, we did various things. We wanted to stay engaged. We wanted to put out information to our students, but also not in a way that's going to harm them in terms of their grade or their academic progress, because this wasn't their fault either. And then you roll into the summer and it's still going. We had that brief reprieve, I don't know, maybe that was the second summer, I don't remember. It was such a long time, but there was a moment where we felt a little bit better about everything, and then it didn't quite pan out as good as we had hoped for that year, 2020, 2021. And it was definitely a challenge the whole time through, and then you're thinking about the learning gap, because, you know, you're going into the next school year, and a quarter of what you were trying to learn in that year, or half of what you were trying to teach and educate and students trying to learn their second semester, maybe didn't happen to the way it should have.
You've hit on some really, I don't want to say monumental, but maybe they almost feel like that way to me now when you think about adapting and meeting these needs. Maybe they don't have the technology, or maybe they don't have access to the Wi-Fi, or a variety of things, or no, based on this experience, this kid needs hard copy material, or, you know, let alone how do you teach a lab class, you know, or, but I'm thinking about even within that, there are a set of state standards that have not changed, right? Like that standard is still out there, has to be met. If you're going into your junior or senior year and you're taking AP exams, the AP didn't change their standards. You still have to make that score to, you know. And so somehow you have to find a way to make that happen
Yeah.
based
Very
on this
resourceful.
adaptive model. And just like you said, you know, the students aren't going to be harmed for an experience they didn't have control over. So how do you find a way to deliver, you know, the curriculum, in effect, to hopefully accomplish?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
If we had the answer to that, we
Yes.
would be writing
Yes.
books and millionaires
Yes.
right now,
Yes.
right? Everybody adaptive right away. So let's take a look at
Sure.
what are some of the specific strategies or tools or programs that 218 or you know Shepard specifically use to help get through that.
Yeah, I think we got really, really good at doing some things digitally. So that school year 2020, 2021, we really had to fully embrace the technology platforms in all disciplines. So Google Classroom became imperative. Everybody had to get skilled at that. Zoom became imperative. We had to get skilled at it, not just as educators, but students and families. And you know, finding that quiet place to learn was a challenge for, you know, for students as well. Not everybody, you know, has their own room with their own desk to study at. While, you know, I'm one of 5 children, so I like, you know, during this time, I just thought back, how would I have done this?
Yeah.
Being one of 5 children, sharing bedrooms with, you know, and we all need to try to Zoom.
Right. And I heard some of those stories,
Yeah.
right? Kids in the background, or this kid's over here, and do they have the space, the quiet space,
Right.
let alone?
Right. Yeah. So, so that was a challenge, but I do think that we got pretty good at it, as good as you could, and we've learned, and we were able to use some of those skills moving forward. I think we're going to be able to do that in a productive way. And there are still the challenges with, you know, some of our lab classes or some of our science classes, some of, you know, but there are some really great digital tools that are available that our curriculum directors and our teachers found and did their research and were able to bring forward to students. So we had to adapt. They couldn't physically experience some of the labs, so you had to watch a video on that, or you had to do a video analysis. So there were some things that we had to adapt to do. One example, I was invited to our choir teacher's classroom. So it was Zoom. We were fully Zoom at the time. So everybody was on Zoom, and he was able to invite in one of the Chicago area cast members from Hamilton, and
Wow.
and it was really a cool experience. And I'm glad he invited me in, and to listen to the students, the questions that they had, to hear this actor, performer, singer describe what he was going through with. Here he's getting this huge opportunity, and now it's put on pause. So how is he adapting? Where is he connecting? And so through that, there were some really unique experiences that just were born out of the situation as well. And I don't know if that would have happened had we not been in this situation.
Right. I mean, that's an excellent example. That's even cheating into the next question a little bit, but that's an excellent example, I think, of one of the positives that came out of this, that we found ways to connect to people in the public, or performers, or educators, or politicians, or people in the corporate world that normally we wouldn't tap into, or we would think they would have to come to the building, right?
Yes.
Or we'd have to go to them.
Yes.
You know, and whether Zoom or some other format, all of a sudden, no, we can connect to anybody almost anywhere in the country.
Yes.
And possibly, you know, you do get some of these other experiences where you get to speak to a name or a person that would normally be not accessible, right? Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting offshoot of it. And obviously, I would imagine that's something we'll see going forward, too.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do hope so. I think there's opportunity for connections through the digital world that you can't have in the physical world. But it doesn't replace the actual presence in the school and physical connection, and to be able to be in a classroom and directly learn from your colleagues. It's really hard on a Zoom to lean over and say, I don't. Can you show me what's happening? I'm
Especially
not sure.
if the video's off, right?
Right, right. So just the opportunity to learn is just magnified when you are in the classroom as opposed to when you are on Zoom. But it's served its purpose for us, and it got us through.
Right. I think, you know, you've hit on another really I think, powerful part of education. The element of the energy that shows up when you get 25, 30 kids in a room with their teacher and they're working on something and they get excited about it,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
There's no way, unfortunately, but I can't imagine a way a Zoom experience can match that type of encounter.
One teacher that I was, and then there was still the evaluation processes going on, right? So one of the teachers that I was working with through that process, at the end, he said, I've never been a stand-up comic, but I feel like is this mic on? Is anyone out there? My jokes aren't landing. I'm not, so just that feedback that you get, was really hard to come by.
Right, and using your word feedback there too, you mentioned this earlier, another key component to that experience in the classroom that is as powerful as the digital or Zoom experience can be, being able to monitor kids' well-being or their progress on a specific assignment. When they come into the room, how are they doing? Where are they at?
Right.
Are they ready to go? And help them get into the place where they're ready to focus.
Right.
And then also just to be able to check, I can tell them to do something through the screen, but it's much harder to check to see what's actually going on here.
Right.
So there are some ways that model works really well, we've talked about, but then there are some ways where it comes way short of a traditional educational experience.
Yeah, definitely.
So maybe one of the things we found out is that the vast majority of students, that social dynamic of the presence in the building with their teachers is a key component to the process.
I agree, absolutely, and I think it's teaching and learning is just this reciprocal process.
Yes.
So you as an educator, you are also fueled by the energy in the room and in the environment, and it helps continue the passion that you have for your content and for your students. And it was a real challenge. There was a mental health impact on our students, and as leaders in the school, we had to do what we could to help keep the spirits up of the staff as well. This was a challenging time. I mean, if you're used to that energy, that that give and take, and it really just got flipped upside down. And so, while there was still some, hesitation, when we returned to full school, from staff, students, parents, just about everybody, is this going to be okay? There was also some real excitement around it, and there's just a lot of nervous energy around, can we actually return?
Right. And I think to some degree, and having been in the building the last couple of years, when teachers were in, for myself personally, you can see there is a transitioning thing happening here, where kids are, I think, overall, maybe it's like take the thing away and they realize how much they missed what they had, so they're happy to be there. But there is a transition process happening again the other way, like relearning how to function in a school classroom setting.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We a little bit, there is this other co-curricular and athletic element to the high school experience that I can't imagine what you were able to replicate remotely. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Well, that was a challenge. Many of our larger events were either canceled or postponed. There were whole athletic seasons that first spring that were just
I would say even controlling attendance levels. When competition or a thing could happen, how many people?
Sure, we
can
even
bring?
had stickers on the bleachers. You can sit here, you can sit here. So to help make sure that we were within compliance and keeping everybody safe. Obviously, that was at the forefront. We only wanted to do things that were going to keep everybody safe, because you jeopardize the whole thing.
Right.
We have a little bit of an opportunity here to come back together and be present with each other. And we really were diligent about following the guidelines, because we didn't want to jeopardize what little bit we had back at that moment. And the opportunity, students, they welcomed the opportunity to compete when there was no audience. Just the fact that they could, be able to compete. Something
they care about passionately, they're still able to do it. Okay, fine, not in front of my friends or family, but I get to do it.
Yeah, and so that was important to us as well. As much as we could bring, as much as we were allowed to do, we worked really hard to make sure we did it, including our graduation ceremonies. Those were, the last 3 years they've looked different. The first year we did what we could to give an in-person experience, but also keep everybody safe. So we had a drive up, drop off. Somebody pulled up, driver stayed in the car, and graduate and as many family members who were in the car not driving were able to come in, walk across the stage, get some pictures, walk out the other door where the car pulled forward and picked them up. And so that was 8 hours of standing on stage administratively
with a parade of cars.
With a parade of cars. And, it just progressed each year. And then we were allowed to have some in person. So we did a quarter of our population. We had 4 ceremonies. So it had more of that sense of the traditional. And we've done what we can to keep everybody safe, but to still provide as much of that essence of whatever it was before.
Yeah. What we think of it as part of a high school experience.
Yes.
And graduation is a huge part of the high school.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I remember the drive-through. That was an emotional thing. The kids so desperately wanted to be there. They wanted to see their friends. They wanted to see their teachers. They wanted to have that moment.
Yes.
And it sounds like most schools found a way, Shepard found a way to provide an experience.
Yes.
Let's go back just a little bit. We talked about, I want to kind of finish on going forward.
Sure.
So now heading into hopefully 22, 23 is going to be a different year than we've seen the last 2. And the things that we learned from the last couple of years that we can take forward and say, okay, hopefully we're not doing that again, but there were some really powerful things that came out of it. One of the things you mentioned, 2 I'll give you. Communication, I thought, is an interesting component to take a look at. And the second thing is it did create kind of a fast-track learning process for technology. Like, you're going to learn this and you're going to use it, and now we have some technology skills that we didn't have before for students and teachers.
Certainly.
Actually.
Yeah, that was the deep end. We all jumped right in. So there was no let's learn how to swim slowly here. We all had to jump right in with the technology end. And I do think the communication levels have improved, and I think our families have appreciated that. We talk about the grade book as a place where parents, counselors, coaches, students, administrators, can all get that's a snapshot of how are we doing right now.
We're not waiting for 2 weeks when grades get
have that.
or a month
and so
or a quarter.
Now we have this, a communication platform that has really evolved in terms of whether you're using, a Canvas program or Google Classroom. You have this digital housing. But it more than houses, it communicates. And I think it's really changed the way, support staff, the way parents, the way, students and teacher are able to have a fuller picture of the student as the learner. And it's really been positive, and I would say all of our staff have really almost completely embraced that process. It's a great, not only, it just does so much. I think that one of the strongest benefits is the communication, but there's a level of organization. There's so much in there now that I think that's going to live on.
Yeah, it sure seems like a great opportunity. Things are more immediate, more accessible. You used the word earlier, transparent. Things are so much more transparent now because of it. Google Classroom, Canvas are, they're good platforms to work with. I think there's also this element that kids have learned this. They can work with this model now. Whatever their career future looks like, if a remote experience is part of it, yes, not a big deal.
Absolutely.
They can do it.
Absolutely.
And certainly the communication seems like a key element to this thing.
That's a nonverbal way parents can communicate and teachers can communicate with each other. We can both look at the same picture, and it's a fuller picture than just a percentage. So I think that's been helpful because you get to look at so much. You get the teachers. We have a lot of digital feedback now that the students have, so they have it archived. It's not just. You mentioned digging through the backpack, so it's not just, where's this paper? It's an organized place to go look.
It's in Google Classroom, it's in Canvas.
Absolutely. And you can find it and you can pull up the comment. And some teachers even made video comments. They were just so, looking for ways to connect, and personalize that, because you would have personalized that in the classroom. And so some of them made video comments, here's some feedback for you, and they have that, and they're able to draw from that again.
I think that touches on, I don't know if you have any others, positives you want to bring up, we'll do that, but one quick one I think is there is an element, probably maybe unintentionally, but as a byproduct of this, is that students, to some degree, had more tools. Now, we want them to be responsible for their own grade, you know, take ownership of it. And some tools are out there now to make it easier for them to say, no, you can monitor your work, your progress. Is it complete? What do you need to improve on? Whatever those things, which may have been a little bit, not impossible. I think it was always part of the educational experience, but maybe not as easily as accessible as it is now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think that they're getting better at that as well. And you know, just like something can get lost in your backpack, it can get lost in the digital world as well.
Yeah,
so you know, I think we've gotten better at learning that organizational structure digitally. So, but I think that's a lifelong skill, like you had mentioned, that will help them moving forward. One other thing, you know, just in terms of positive, is just the communication through Zoom that we've had with parents as well. I think that, you know, we had some of our best parent-teacher conference attendance rates during the pandemic because we had to transition them to Zoom, and it worked. So the feedback that I've gotten from our parent advisory groups is, you know, can you please keep that, or at least keep some of that. And some will still say, and some did say at the meetings, well, I want to come in the building. I enjoy the face-to-face. And so we've tried to do a hybrid version of that. Sometimes slots are available for Zoom only, and sometimes slots are available for in-person. And it seems to provide those options. Everyone's kind of a bit busy, or maybe their comfort level just wasn't back up to you know, pre-pandemic in terms of being out in a public place. This affected so many families in so many different ways that we can't just apply, you know, the same approach to everything anymore. And so that's been, you know, just that alone, you know, are there other ways for us to provide this besides the traditional way? And that's been, it's opened our minds, I think.
It certainly has facilitated the idea of, you know, differentiation, you know, and now for certainly we see it in so many different ways. And that term hybrid, which has become so part of our vocabulary now.
Yes.
Certainly this is, you know, an experience that's going to show the different ways we can meet different needs of different students and families and faculty in their delivery.
Yes.
Excuse me, whatever their subject matter is. Dr. Jen Pollock.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That's quite an analysis of what, you know, happened and what you adapted. Wish you the best at Shepard next year. I hope you have a much more normal, traditional, whatever the experience looks like.
Me too. Thank you very much.
All right, good. Thank you for being here. I'm Dave Wurzel, and you've been watching Spotlight. Today the Spotlight has been on education and hopefully moving forward to a post-pandemic experience in the classroom. Thank you for watching.